Okay, good.
Okay, we're already live, just so you know. I forgot to tell you to not turn everything on when you came on. So
that's fine.
Sorry about that.
I'm good. I'm ready.
I've been watching the Nate Land podcast. You ever watch that?
No, I never have. You know me. You know how much time I have for.
Oh, that's true. Like you had 3 minutes a day just to goof off. All right. Here we go.
See the questions.
Welcome to our live Q&A. We're trying to do one of these a week now because they're going so well and we have the best time doing them. But so if you have any questions, this is for the people watching on YouTube. This is for our body language membership.com group. And so we answer their questions. But we'll take a look at your questions. If we get back on later, we may answer them on the channel if we get a chance. We get time. Greg won't have time, but I may have time. So that's what's going on here.
Yeah.
Welcome to this. And so whatever questions you've got, just ask them in the comments below. So, all right, Greg.
So 8 minutes ago, Hema question. Yep. Hey guys, what do you believe are good jobs for intuitives, those with interest in human behavior who would rather work a more behind the scenes job as an introvert? Also, I'm curious to what Scott and other behavior panelists Myers-Briggs types are. I'm assuming Scott is an extrovert, but guessed Greg wrong before, so could be again. Interestingly, most in terms of whether I'm an introvert or an extrovert, if you were around me much, you would know I'm very, very much an extrovert. Scott is too, but he may play one on TV. I don't know. So
I think I'm an INFJ.
Yeah. I'm not surprised.
Don't like to go out.
Big in front of people, and then calm when you get your energy from home. Yeah. So in terms of introverts, some of the best interviewers, some of the best interrogators, some of the best folks I've ever worked with in the intelligence business were truly introverts, because introverted doesn't mean that you can't perform. It means that you wear out very quickly. One of the best interrogators I ever knew was, and I won't give her last name, was a young woman named Emily. And Emily was so introverted, when she went in the interrogation room, she wouldn't take no for an answer. And it was about performance. It was about getting the information and taking it back. So I'm always careful to say, where should introverts work? Because also one of the best people I ever had work for me in corporate America was an introvert who could talk to 600 people casually and then go home and get away from people. So careful with that. In terms of working behind the scenes, there are lots of places, a lot of analysts, a lot of people who watch video and say, hey, go try this, and don't actually get in the interrogation room. Sometimes in the intelligence business are there. I would say a lot of HR folks I know are introverted too, but are good people. So I don't know. That's just my opinion. Scott, you got some?
You know what? I'm trying to get this thing happening so I don't even listen.
That's fine. Let's move to the next one. Hopefully that answers, Emma, and I hope I got your name right.
Yeah. Let's see. Aaron Chase. I know Aaron. When noticing inner dialogue, what is it I'm seeing? What is the significance? What's the person doing? A lot of times what you'll see just what you think you see. They'll see them look away. And sometimes you'll see them as they're thinking, you might see their mouth move. This is when you're, say if you're watching a monitor, it's an interrogation or something, and you're watching them from the monitor, you can see that. If you're talking to someone, you can tell because of the way their expressions will change as you talk, not in reaction to what you say, but in reaction as to what they're thinking. Greg, just lost you.
I'm here. No, I'm here. It just clicked.
Your camera went off, not your mute.
I saw it. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
So inner dialogue, the first thing to think about when you're talking about somebody having an inner conversation is, when I talk about eye movement, I'll often say, you see them drop their eyes down to the left, but it's more about their eyes defocus on you, defocus on the situation, and they may go and their eyes drop off somewhere down here most of the time. You have to baseline a person to figure out what they're doing. But, if you go back to the NLP, and I always say they had a great start to looking for those eye movements, then you'll see that they would say down left is that inner conversation. But yeah, you're looking for the person to defocus. And again, I'm working on an eye movement class. Main reason I haven't finished it is because I'm going to give you guys some references to studies and MRI and all that kind of thing when I finish it. So you got reading as well. You can go dig into it yourself. But the eyes don't stay focused on you. They move away from you. And that's not breaking eye contact. That's defocusing and looking internally. They may not even be looking at anything, if that makes sense. That's what I look for in a conversation.
Aaron also asked, can severe trauma and abuse induce psychopathy? Only if you get brain damage from it, if it does something to your brain. Because we know that the big problem with psychopathy, or what causes it, or the root of it, is in the amygdala, where they don't function properly. They're missing, they're damaged, but they don't look normal, but they function improperly. So that could happen if you get hit in the head and it messes with your amygdala.
Yeah, here's a great question from John Michael, and we won't use your last name. But you ask, when I entered working with Wall Street, was it because I wanted something completely different from what I was doing as an interrogator, counter-interrogation instructor, or is it to apply my specialist skills? So about 20 years ago, I moved into corporate America and started working more there. Now, I also, up until about 2010, 12, somewhere in there, I was still teaching pretty consistently with folks who were out protecting us, and would do it again given the right opportunities. But you drift to where you drift, and I've been working in business for a while, and then got the opportunity to do some work with Wall Street folks around due diligence in companies, along with occasionally getting the chance to teach some folks, bankers and that, about the stuff I know and deception. So yeah, I like constant growth and challenge, and it was a great opportunity, some good people to work with, and it's been interesting. Thanks for that question.
Okay.
Barry asks, did you see that one?
No, I've scooted down to some people who had asked stuff earlier, but go ahead.
Oh, got it. Okay, go. Yep.
Oh, you can do that one.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Oh, okay. Charity Burnett. I'm going to say their last name. She was just us on here. Who's your favorite speaker when it comes to communication and leadership? For example, my favorite is the famous British F-bomber, Chef Gordon Ramsay, in his masterclass. It's remarkable how he juggles visual, auditory, and kinesthetic culinary techniques to inspire people to action in the kitchen. This is going to sound corny, but I really like Mark. I don't know if you've ever seen Mark Bowden give one of his talks, but man, it's really good. He's supposed to be really good at presentations. He's really good at presentations. He really is. Because I figured, wow, we'll go see Mark and it would be good, because he was in Nashville and I went and he gave a talk. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was wonderful. It was one of those things where I haven't been in the music business. When you see somebody, if you hang out with them before their show, and they're at what they do, they're the best in the world at what they do, and they're really lauded for that. Then you're standing there talking to them. They go, "Oh, hang on just a minute, man. Hang on, don't forget what you're saying. Hang on, go do this." And they go do their show, and they come back and they go, "Well, anyway, it's like somebody doing this thing that's really, really awesome." That's what it was like. So that might be part of it, me being blown away by that. But I really like Mark. I think he does a great job. So, okay, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I'll run through a list, and in no particular order, guys. Jamie asks, "Hi, fellas. How can I differentiate authentic alpha behaviors from people trying to emulate alpha behaviors?" My number one indicator is comfort in their own skin. I've worked with a bunch of really true alpha guys. I mean, in my life of working SEER and working, I worked there with Delta, with Navy SEALs occasionally, with Green Beret guys all the time, and with Rangers. A lot of alpha behaviors there. I always noticed that the guy strutting is not the alpha. The guy strutting is because there's an alpha close by. So look for a guy who's just comfortable in his own skin. Look for a lady who's comfortable in her own skin. And you by now know I use guys kind of interchangeably for all people with a heartbeat. Just know that. But people who strut are not usually alpha. It's those who are calm in their own skin that are really the alphas. My opinion.
You nailed that. Barry B asks, what are the skills a person needs to be called a body language expert? Well, I'd say, well, anybody can say they're a body language expert, but and some people they spend almost, 2 and 3 weeks Googling things to become an expert and write a bunch of stuff down and memorize it and go out and start giving talks and training people. Yeah, it depends on what you, in my opinion, if you're an expert in that, you got to have you've got to know a whole lot. You've got to know your research. You've got to be able to talk about research and be able to talk about the people who have laid the groundwork for the things you're talking about. A lot of things Greg and I talk about when we train military or law enforcement. We're not just telling them, well, this is stuff we've read and we know because this happens, and this means something. If we give people wrong information, it could get them killed. So we take it very seriously. It's nothing like we get on here and goof around and stuff, but when it comes to that, it's a whole different personality type you switch into when you start training people and giving them information that could get them killed if they don't do it For example, if you're talking about nervousness, what are the differences in how do you know if somebody's nervous? Well, it depends on what kind of nervousness you're talking about. Are you talking about someone? Let's say you're at an outpost in Afghanistan, and somebody's walking up to you, an Afghani's walking up, and they look a little nervous. Well, what kind of nervous are you looking at? Are you looking at the kind of nervous where they're going to run up and touch you and run off? Because that's a little game sometimes they'll play over there because they, run up and touch the American and run off. Or they're nervous because they're going to meet an American. Americans are famous over there. They've never seen one before in real life. You're going to run up and walk up and talk to them and say, hey, how are they? I can't speak that language. Greg can. Or are you seeing somebody who's nervous because they've got 4 pounds of C4 strapped to their back and they're going to blow everybody up once they get to you. So it's knowing different types of nervousness and where the studies that show you that are and your experience with seeing that, your experience with talking to people with that. So there's a lot a lot that comes with that, with saying you're an expert. You can say you're an expert, but actually being one, there aren't that many of us when you think about it, Greg. I mean, there are maybe, how many do we know?
Yeah, I know quite a few, but they're not hundreds that I know. I mean, when I first started, pardon me, guys, I'm still shaking this cold, I think. But when I first started doing this, I never wrote my first book in 2005. I mean, there were really a handful of folks floating around out there. I think I did some work with Janine. Joe was always there, of course. And a lot of these folks it was not as public in those days. There are not so many people. A lot of us are still tied up in the business. But like Janine, I did a show with her called Secrets of Interrogation. I knew who Joe was. Of course, didn't know Joe well. But there were just a handful of people. Tanya Ryman, I worked with her. She was already on O'Reilly and that kind of thing. But yeah, they're just a handful of folks. And, expertise, there are lots of ways to define expertise and how do you get there? I mean, I will tell you, when I first started doing this, I didn't use the words I use today because I learned the hard way. I learned, self-talk, go watch people, pay attention, keep notes, and understand what people are doing that's different. And so even like my co-author, Marianne Karench, would always say when she started talking to other body language people, they may use different words. Well, yeah. And one of the things, somebody asked this question last time we were doing this, one of the things I think we're going to lose as a result of this becoming more industrialized, and there will be schools where people go and learn and get there, is they won't come from multiple locations. Think about Chase, where he comes from. He comes from, an active military capture kind of a unit. Mark comes from acting and from being a coach to people to show them how to be more authentic. Scott coming from the music business and bringing that with him as he was doing this and double, and double working in two different worlds brings a whole different thing. Mine coming from interrogation and then from working in corporate America and all those places means we have a different kind of sense for what body language means in different locations. I will tell you that if I only had my interrogation days, I don't think I'd be as good at what I do as I am now, having worked with real people every day in every kind of business around the world. And I think it helps. It helps you to understand people differently. Because, I said this many years ago, I had one assignment in military where I knew lots of young and old people. But when you're in the military, and especially when you're working around places like Fort Bragg, almost everybody you know is young and fit, and you don't have to deal with any of that other stuff. Decaying bodies and all that kind of thing. You have to learn all of that over again. Even though you have family that's that way, most of your friend group is very small when you're a military guy because you're moving constantly.
Okay. Helen asks or says, I know you guys try not to do things that are political, but have you ever seen a politician running for office and thought, oh no, this is going to be a disaster? You don't have to say their name. Just say what their name rhymes with.
It rhymes with politician. That's all of them. Most of them I look at, I think, why does somebody want to be a ruler? I just don't get it. I don't understand it. So when a person's running for that, I'm always looking for what their underlying motive is. I just am not a fan of politicians. I'll warn you that up front. I say that all the time. I wish we had term limits so that people couldn't make a career out of it. It always scares me to think somebody's going to be there for the rest of their life, whoever they are. Just kind of how it is.
Yeah, we stay away from politics because no matter what you say, you're going to be wrong to half of anybody watching. So no, I don't. We don't get near that.
And why do you want? Here's the thing. I say this to people all the time. Why do you want a guy who persuades people for a living to give you political advice? it's just not smart. I don't want to advise you on how to think politically because I just don't think it's fair. It's funny, Stephanie, I always find it funny people are afraid of me too. I always say I don't need you guys as character witnesses if you're afraid of me if I ever get in trouble.
All right. Sheila asks, what do you gentlemen do when you unwind from an interrogation that's particularly rough on you? I have dyslexia. Everybody says, I have dyslexia. I really do, so it's tough to read sometimes. So, Greg, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think you get to a point that it is just... I did theater many years ago, and theater is you go in, you do your thing, and you walk off stage. It's the same thing. You have to get to a point that's that way. You have to have a box that all goes in. And even if the interrogation is not particularly rough on us, it's hard because you're constantly paying attention. You're focused. You're trying to get information. And you often lose time. I'll give you a great example. I interrogated a bunch of guys for about 5 hours in the desert in the first Gulf War and had no idea that it was 5 hours, because I was just sitting talking to a bunch of people and paying attention to all their details. Now, I was also trying to do it in a foreign language. And when I was done, I turned around and I realized I was kind of dehydrated. And the guy said, well, you've been talking to these guys for 5 hours. It just drifts away because you're so focused on the other person. And anytime you're doing that, I think it is tough. So, Sheila, when you say tough on us, you mean what we're finding out. It depends. It depends on whether you put that in a box and walk away or whether you just need to go scream in the bushes or something.
Yeah, for me, it depends on what it is. My situation is a little bit different than Greg's. I've called Greg before after when I said, "Oh, you're not gonna believe what had just happened." I think you remember the last one I talked to you about. Yeah. So sometimes just kind of if you blow it off, you blow off steam with somebody who understands where you're coming from. That's another thing about being an expert. There's not too many people you can go out and talk to and relax and say, "Here's what I saw. Here's what's going on," and be able to connect with that person. So it's for me. A lot of times you come home and it's just, you really just have to stay up here with it. So you have to be able to put that in a box and put it over there and then never think about it again. You just squish it down. But if it's something that's really bad, it's good to run over it with somebody, because if you don't, those kind of things will after a while creep up on you. I always say I'm never surprised, but always disappointed when I find somebody's done something horrible. Helen has a great question. It's scary to think of scumbags such as Russell Williams out there in society living what seems to be an ordinary married life. How do we get duped? How do we not get duped? Do you feel you can pick up on a psychopath in everyday life? Maybe you could do an interview discussion with someone who's in such a relationship. Good idea for an interview. Maybe we'll find somebody, Scott, for the body language membership. I'll tell you this. I think the more stellar somebody appears, the more likely their skeletons are bigger. It's just always been something I've dealt with, that they aggrandize and make that stuff so giant that then you're behind the scenes going, hold on, and go from there. It's if I see a person who is overly perfect, I wonder why. And often we want people to be perfect. And nobody is. All of us have our warts. All of us have our flaws. All of us have our character flaws. So it's just one of those things I look for. The other thing I've used in the past is I call somebody glossy, and it's what we call romancer. They're paying you way too much attention. I'm just cautious with those kind of folks. Yeah. Okay. From Nicole, she says, not a body language question. You're always providing great nonfiction book recommendations. Do you have any favorite fiction books or authors? Thanks. I don't read a lot of nonfiction. I probably shouldn't say that. It sounds horrible. But I'm either reading research or somebody's new. I'm not a big fiction person. I think it's because I don't like to live in the fiction world. But I wish I had something to tell you. I don't. Yeah. Greg?
I read history. I'm a history fan. Read history, and I read, when I have time, studies and that kind of thing, business books. I'm not an interesting guy in that way, I guess.
Yeah.
I think history is so much more complex than fiction that it's just interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not that I'm sure I would like it, but I just...
Well, everybody's got their own taste, and I think it probably draws us to that.
Okay, Marlu asks, how can you adjust your own body language in contact with a malignant narcissist or psychopath in order to protect yourself in conversation and interrogation therapy at work or in private life? Are there differences in context what techniques you use. Oh yeah. Because when you're dealing, once you can't walk in and say, oh, this person's a psychopath or this person's a narcissist. You kind of got to ask questions around that to find out if they are. When you first approach them. So if you go in and you go straight down the read technique, which some people do, but you have to use that as a technique and put your own stuff in it. So personally, when I go in, I pretend like I'm in the middle of finishing something up. Once I get past the, what are you doing? Or I think these people say you did this, in other words. So when I start asking them questions, I may say something. I've said something like this before. So as I'm writing, I might look up and go, where'd you get that shirt? I haven't seen one of those in a while. You kind of see if you're dealing with an ego there. You say, I haven't seen anybody wearing that in a while. And then you go on writing and you see what feedback you get. You can look back up and see what kind of face you're looking at. If it kind of gets on their nerves right out of the gate, then you might be heading down the road with somebody who's got a big ego when they should be focused on what's going on with them, why they're there, why they might be in trouble. There are different ways of seeing that. But as you go along, you discover what you're dealing with in the questioning process. Greg, how do you handle that?
Yeah, you can't ever tell somebody is a psychopath in just a minute. You can find lots of traits. Psychopathy, I think, is a lot of people will jump to it because it's such a complex thing. But if you look, there's a list of things, and you can run down the checklist and run through that, and there's a process. But at the end of the day, what I try to find is what kind of person am I dealing with? Lots of people are narcissistic and not psychopaths. And so their ego gets in their own way and that kind of thing. And good-hearted in some cases, but just that gets in their way. I happen to know a few. But as you're dealing with that, what I usually try to do is just find out, hey, what's this hang up? What do I have to get around to get this person to talk to me and do this kind of thing? If you're trying to spot them in the wild, I think it's a lot harder in a few minutes with a psychopath. If you're dealing with people every day, you'll start to see, go look at Robert Hare's list, self-aggrandizing behavior, bump, 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 run down that list. And if you see all that, then you just need to be cautious. But all psychopaths aren't violent. All narcissists aren't violent. None of that is true. I think they're just different ways of wiring and how they deal with the world. What they do with it is what matters. And guys, none of us, not one of us is a poster child for perfect. And what we do with what we get is what makes character, in my opinion. Some people have to overcome things that are difficult. And there's psychopaths who've done lots of great things in the world. But then there's lots of them who've done lots of horrible things. So, and remember, the last thing I'll leave you with is when you're talking about a psychopath, what you're talking about is a series of symptoms that we've drawn a box around and said, this is a psychopath. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. Gulf Coasting, that's their name, asks,
good question.
What role does the actual question asked play when considering where is their concern? For example, when the press specifically asks the parent of a missing child, how are you doing? Do you still expect them to answer expressing concern only for the child? Or,
yeah.
You want to go first?
So yeah, sure, I'll jump on this one. So two things. The role of the question matters, but if you ask me and give me the opportunity to get in front of a camera and it's all about me, and I don't quickly go, I'm doing okay, all things considered, but if it goes on and on and on about how bad it's been for me, then you probably are starting to look at why are they not trying to get information out and this kind of thing. Of course, humans feel obliged to talk and answer questions people ask. It's one of the best things about specifically American society. So when you poke on somebody, and even asking how are you doing, that can open the door for lots of other things. A good questioner understands that you bridge that quickly once you get them going and move to the next step. For example, if you say, how are you doing? And they start rambling, you use a direct question, and the next step should be a leading question. A leading question is a yes or no question. It cuts off the conversation, and then you re-question for your next piece. We'll bring Jim Pyle on, who's one of the best questioners I know.
Oh, yeah.
Jim was an instructor when I was a baby interrogator, as I always say. We were roommates in language school, and then he was an instructor. He'd already been an interrogator when I first met him. So he's great at questioning and one of the best. And there's a process to questioning. But if you talk like an interrogator, like the way they're taught in school, people don't want to talk to you very much. If you learn to question the way he does, it's more, a more broad approach. What else? You get a lot more information. So yeah, good questioning is everything. It can change the the information you're getting. And we have to pay attention to that when we're analyzing these parents of missing kids. That's part of the hard thing for us, is how good or bad is a questioner. Great question.
Yeah. All right. Amanda asks, wondering what your take is on a YouTuber named Kanika Batra. She's diagnosed with ASPD and NPD and wants to bring awareness to cluster B personality disorders, how people can protect themselves and how those with a diagnosis can act responsibly. You want to do that one, Craig?
I don't know anything about this person, and I will go and look and see, and maybe we can talk about it next time. I haven't noticed, but it's great to have people who have that frame of reference, who can talk about how they feel, what they see, how they do things. Once somebody is diagnosed with anything, having their understanding is very different from having ours. And when we talk about people who are neurotypical, it just means you don't have this or that. And, as we learn more and more about neurology and how the brain works, whether that's associated with gender, which people bring up all the time, or whether that's associated with damage or it's associated with something else, then we're going to have more and more people who are not neurotypical. When I was young, the autism thing and all those things were not as prominent as they are now. We know a lot more about those things than we knew when I was young.
Okay. Here's one from, let's see, and here's another one from Helen. Are there any studies that analyze if deaf people are better at reading body language? I don't know what the studies are, but I know a couple of deaf people, and that's what they do. That's how they communicate. They watch what you're doing. So in my opinion, anyway, they're spot on. I've heard from some deaf people that actually watch the behavior panel, and they read the CC thing at the bottom, closed caption stuff. And every now and then, Greg and I and Chase will talk back and forth using some sign language things. And so they'll say, I see what you're doing. I saw you doing that. So because there's stuff that I probably shouldn't be saying this, should I? Anyway, so I think deaf people are spot on that. They see a lot of things that normal old people don't see. So, or hearing people don't see, because that's where their focus is on that's how they communicate and know what you're saying is through your body language, literally through your body language. So that's it's got to be tough on you, but man, what a gift to be able to do it like that. If I could do it like that, as good as some of those people can, holy smokes. I'd be like Joe Navarro or something. I'd be one of those guys.
Helena has a great question. I think we may have answered this one somewhere else, but let's make sure we cover it. I find myself getting somehow sad the more I observe. Did you ever come to the point you only saw brains behind everyone in your training? How do you cope with sort of sadness coming from observing? Well, here's the thing. When you first start doing that, you're of course going to be clinical and try to be clinical with people. But remember, behind that scenes, that brain, what makes humans really cool is that we are all a very complex series of experiences and knowledge. Every one of us is unique. And that's the part. I have intellectual curiosity about every person I meet. My wife would tell you I would talk to anyone because every person has a different experience than I do. And I learn something from every one of them. Sometimes I learn that guy's creepy and I don't want to ever talk to him again. But most of the time, I learn some little tidbit that changes how I see the world. And if you can keep that in mind, just because a person's body language says, hey, I'm uncomfortable with you, and that doesn't mean that you can't open that up and make the person more comfortable, walk away from it with an experience that changes how you see the world. That's the way I look at people.
Okay. Elaine asks, reading body language has not been a problem for me. However, knowing how to address the mixed message between what I'm observing and the person's body language is problematic for me. Most of the time, it's no big deal. I can just let it go, since questioning people makes me feel uncomfortable for some strange reason. Other times, however, it's important that I get to the truth, and I'm not effective at it. Do you have any suggestions of, perhaps, how to approach people whom you know are lying, or how to get over feeling uncomfortable? Well, sometimes you just got to let it go, because everybody lies. They do everything from the little teeny weeny white lies to the big, huge ones. A lot of it is about ego. So the little white lies are the things that are sort of like the oil in the cogs of human interaction and social relationships. So a lot of times, with our skill set, if we called everybody we knew when we thought they were not being honest about something, we'd be known as that. Nobody would want to talk to you. Just nobody would like you at all. The same the way they wouldn't like you at all if that happened. So don't worry about not being able to, or feeling uncomfortable about that, because I'm uncomfortable a lot, because I'm like, oh man, like I've said before, if we're somewhere and somebody starts saying something that doesn't sound right, and I go, really? Tell me more about that. Then my wife always says, don't, because she knows I'm going in to see what's going on. Yeah. The person may not know that I'm doing that, but I may embarrass them if they have to come out and say, yeah, that's not true. Or, well, I'm just adding to that. So don't worry about that. If it's not that.
Guys, at the end of the day, this skill set should make you a little uncomfortable, because it makes you realize what you do, number one, makes you self-aware, but also makes you realize what other people are doing. But we're all just in this boat trying to make this life work. And I say to people sometimes that tile is what we all do. I mean, we're all making our way through life doing things. And sometimes those little falsehoods or polite lies and those kinds of things are kind of like grout that ties it all together and makes it all bearable. So try to look for, don't judge people too much for making small lies or those kinds of things, because people do it every day. Do these pants make my butt look big? Well, what are you going to say to that? Nobody's ever going to say, yeah, of course those are white lies that make people feel better. Hey, how's my hair look? Well, if it looks like mine, there's not much you can do about it. You really don't want to be told every day, hey, your hair looks ragged. So people will say, yeah, it looks all right. It is what it is. Yeah. So just sometimes it's okay. The other one, a great question from Giselle here, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Backward question. How does one politely respond to people who ask too many questions in conversations? I've encountered people whose interactions feel like the stereotype of an interrogator minus the light bulb dangling overhead. I never want to be rude. How can I graciously respond? I find that leading questions are wonderful and beautiful things. A leading question is can, will, did, or have, those kinds of things that only have a yes or no answer. And that stops questioning. When somebody asks you a question that feels too probing, as you respond, say, did you ever? And the next thing you know, now you've got them back on their heels in a yes or no question. It allows you to interject and change the direction of the conversation. And it's polite. People do it all day, every day.
Okay. Have y'all ever considered doing a massive gathering, preferably in Nashville, with y'all, as well as other speakers, for those of us who would squeak with joy to see you in person? Greg, you no longer scare me.
Good.
Well, we've actually talked about having like a conference or something and getting all the body language people together. And we talked about having it in Nashville. We talked about it. It was a couple of months ago during COVID. We're like, what are we going to do when this is over? So we've actually talked about that, and that might happen at some point.
Yeah, the behavior panel for sure. We're going to do something, and we'll let you know. We as a team are going to do some kind of collective, and we may bring in some other speakers as well. Guys, for us, the interesting piece is all four of us had never been together at the same time. Matter of fact, I'm leaving to meet Chase here in a little bit for the first time I've been face-to-face with Chase, if you didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, you're going to see him today. What time? Do y'all find a time yet?
Late day. I've got a meeting, I think, at 4, and we'll go out after that and grab a beer and chat for a bit.
Get a picture, too.
Yeah, we'll do.
Let's see. I'm still looking for a good question here. I wonder, I haven't read this yet, but Sabrina, this is from you. Are psychopaths born that way, or as a result of possible trauma on the brain development? Nature versus nurture question. Thanks. Yeah, most of the time they're born that way, but then trauma can make that happen. Because somebody else I saw a second ago asked about how do you damage your amygdala? You can be in a car wreck. You can take drugs. You can, depending on what the drugs are. A lot of things can happen to damage those. And anything that can give you brain damage can do that. You can be without oxygen for a while. A lot of things can happen. So, but the difference in sociopath and psychopath, I think I went over this in our first one of these, so I won't make it very long this time. But the differences are, in real life, there are no sociopaths. Sociopath is just a term that softens psychopath. And what you would see as a sociopath, or what people think are sociopaths, they're just hardcore criminals. They're mean. They usually get killed early. They end up in prison early because they'll kill somebody or do something. They're just violent people. And a lot of times they're malignant narcissists. Not every time, but most of the time they definitely are. All psychopaths are narcissists, but not all narcissists are psychopaths. So what people term as a sociopath just scooches right up next to the psychopath without having the problems with the amygdala, in other words.
David, you ask a good question. Why are research articles important for understanding body language, or are they? Well, good question. The only thing that research does, because remember, when we talk about research, often we're talking about college studies. The only thing that it does is validate what you're seeing because you're finding patterns and you're recording it. I'll tell you that years ago when I first started doing all this stuff and working with a psych back when I was in my 20s, he said, document everything you see, write down everything you see. That's what we do. And so once you start paying attention, you see trends. That it is valid in that it's a control versus you're just seeing things in the field and anecdotally writing them down. So I think there's value to it in that way. A lot of the research we're looking at, the kind of things that Scott references, are what's going on inside your head when you do these things. And that's good. We've actually talked to some guys at a university about using fMRI to study eyes. And they said, I don't think you need fMRI to prove what you're doing. You just proved it to us standing in front of us. So it's interesting. It's valuable, but I think we were reading body language long before we did these studies. The other thing to remember is when you do a university study and you bring people in and they're kids from a college grad program, it's different than SEER school where you were grabbing guys up by their collar, snatching them, abducting them, bringing them in and inducing stress, and they have a vested interest in what they're hiding. Or in a real criminal investigation or in a real interrogation where somebody has a vested interest in what they're hiding. It's going to be different because there's no ramped up fight or flight. There's no fear. There's no all the stress hormones inside their body going on. So it's really easy for them to lie or not lie unless there's some ethical reason they feel bad about it. So yeah, good question.
Yeah, and research and articles. Articles are a little different unless they're backed up by research. But that's where that's where you know for sure what the brain is going through to make these things happen, and you can make better decisions about that. Just because you see that doesn't mean for sure that's what's happening. Remember, there are no absolutes when it comes to body language. I don't care what anybody says. So keep that in mind as you think about that as well. Research is really, really important. It depends on who wrote. If Paul Ekman writes an article, yeah, I'm going to go, okay, well, he's researched it and done all that. But a lot of these things you see on the internet are people that write articles. Here are 5 ways to find out what turns people on. That's just, yeah.
While we're on it, guys, this is Paul Ekman's work. And I'm not going to suggest this book for you to pick up to learn how to read average people's faces. It's a great book, but I mean, this guy is a scientist who studies muscle movement, how it's tied to different things. If you want to learn the mechanics, I mean, all the background of it, you'll see my books tabbed, then it's great, but you don't need that level of detail to learn to read what somebody's doing. That's a piece I would say to you. Yeah.
Because how often are you going to be in a position where your life is at stake because sometimes it's important, but not a whole lot where you're going to be having to explain something to someone so they don't get killed or they know what to look for in bad situations. So, but it's important to understand, to get along with people, what their facial expressions are saying. And it's a fascination that's running across the country, but it's, I guess popularity is getting big now. But it's really important. And I wish I could reach all my books, Greg, not to whipping books out to throw. Yep. But we did a book review on what was the Ekman book I did in the book reviews? I think it was I don't know. It was an Ekman book.
So I don't remember exactly. So you guys, Paul Ekman is the guy who came up with all the micro stuff. He's the guy who found the first universal, or who documented the first universal face. Actually, I think Darwin did the first universal facial expressions way back then. But this, he's the guy who documented the universals like disgust and shock and fear and those things. So he's got good macro stuff, but when you get down to that book, you get into the level of detail that he's talking about muscle movement in each of those and how they're tied to things. I think it's an important piece. I'm going to butcher this name, but I like the question. Is it Taj or Taj? I have no idea how to pronounce your name. Love to hear how, and if you can do it phonetically, I'd like to see. Hi from New Zealand. Will transfer be the type that feigns hysterical wailing and or feigning? We had a case here, Mark Lundy, who was similar to Chris Watts, but had outlandish public displays of crazy. Anything that you do that makes you unavailable through emotional display and that kind of thing, That's what we call trancer. Sitting rocking, I'm too emotional to answer the question. You're feigning the inability to be available because of emotion. That's exactly what we call trancer. And you may do some kind of movement or that thing. Yep, great.
Yeah, and by available, like what he's saying, what Greg is saying is you can't answer the question. Just see him rocking back and forth and looking around and crying and repeating things over and over as they're rocking back and forth. So, and some of that may be real.
No, I've seen it in real life in the first Gulf War. I won't even tell the whole story, but
that's different. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah,
That's
horrific situation, and the guy was unavailable. Truly, I mean, he was buried in his own head. But,
Okay, Marlou asks, can you see the grief muscle when someone loses their job, a relationship, friendship, or something else really important to them? When someone had a big loss in life, will the grief muscle be more pronounced? Yeah. The thing is a lot of people confuse what we term as the grief muscle with the glabella, which are these little muscles right here, and they come in like this, and that's not grief. Greg can do the grief muscle. I can't do it.
Yeah. So what it is, so there are 5 muscles involved in this forehead thing, right? And that what you're calling the glabella right there, I forget what these muscles are. It's been too long, but those muscles that draw up the brows will pull your brows up and create concern or furrow. I mean, guys, if I'm turning on a new camera next week, and I told Scott I'll look 10 years older, you'll be able to see all these wrinkles because it's better resolution. But I've got really pronounced ones there just because of what I've done for a living, and because when I'm thinking, I concentrate that way. But then where the grief thing comes in is this frontalis, if I recall correctly, the muscle, the big forehead muscle, tries to raise at the same time that you're pulling your eyebrows down, and you end up with that arch thing in your head. It's not a muscle, so it's kind of a misnomer. Yeah. And I think if the original calling it a grief muscle was between Duchenne and Darwin, and it actually, he said for simplicity, let's refer to it as grief muscle. That's where it came from. Yeah, that helped. Yeah. Sorry, Scott.
No, that's what we're doing out here. Yeah. I learn something every time you speak, Greg. So, and the grief muscle also is, your dog may die. You may have somebody in your family die, those types of things. Your muscle, grief muscle can show up when you lose your job because you know all that's going to come with it. And you're grieving that you're losing a bunch of people at the place and all that. I think I put it on the community or in the community where when my dog Albert died and my grief muscle, that day I took a picture and sent it to all the guys, and it's the worst it's ever been. It's huge. So it's gross looking. It was so big. But so a lot of things can trip that off. Some people, after they've experienced something, a really horrible, something horrible, then that will last for months and months and longer than that. I know a buddy of mine, I can't, I'm not going to talk about that, but, so you can have a lot of things happen. You can have a lot of things happen to make the grief muscle kick in and last and kick in at some other times. Okay, let's see what else we got here.
So Alicia asked a question. Do you advocate studying psychology to better read people? I think psychology gives you mechanics of what we think is going on in people's heads, and based on all the knowledge and study we've done. I don't know if it helps you better read people. It might help you understand why they're doing what they're doing. And there are a couple of profound things in psychology you can pick up and learn from. My go-to is Maslow's hierarchy, because social psychology is actually, humans are really complex creatures because of how we interact with each other. That's almost as important as why the brain works anyway. My opinion.
Alicia asks, do you advocate studying psychology to better read people?
I just answered that one.
Did you? I'm sorry.
Scott focuses when he's reading, so I had to tell.
I have dyslexia, and I really do, or I can't read. Let's see.
We don't have sign language fluency to conversational level, Jenna. Wish we did.
No,
that would be great.
Not at all. We just know some things to watch it, and some other things or.
Well, Chase and I use military sign language, so hand signaling. That's different than the kind that you're talking about as well. American sign.
But there's anyway. Is there a way of making Is there a way of recognizing dangerous personalities accessible to young kids? I can't think. I mean, there are. You know, if some guy walks up, look out for a guy with a van who climbs out of a van and asks if you want to help him find a puppy. I don't know if they're capable of taking all that in. And if you want to present those, I don't know how you would present that to them so it wouldn't horrify them for the rest of their lives.
The thing to me to be careful, for children to be careful, is somebody who is overly familiar. I mean, overly familiar. Most of us know that there's a line between, we can be polite to children, but overly familiar is dangerous because kids are not, everybody will say kids are great at reading body language. They're not. They're just not. They're great at things they see, but children's focus is not the same as an adult's focus. People, and part of the reason, to Scott's point, when somebody comes up and says, hey, could you help me with this puppy or something, is because the kid projects immediately the puppy is a good thing, so everything must be good. And humans are bad at that in general. Somebody asked a question earlier about not being taken in daily life by a psychopath. If you need something and somebody's willing to provide it, it is fulfilling something for you, and you're going to project on them. It's the number one reason for false confession, by the way, guys. It's not, most people don't go in and say, hey, I want a false confession. They go in there and they find this one thing that they believe indicates a person's guilty. And then when it starts to fall apart, they feed them guilty knowledge and they end up with a false confession. It's self-fulfilling when you have something you're after at all cost and the person appears to provide it. And that's how you project. Just my opinion, but that's how you project.
All right, I just had one. Let's see. From Maria. Hi, Maria. About how long does it take to get really good at seeing the body language you guys talk about in the behavior panel videos? When I watch the videos, I have a hard time seeing all the actions you're speaking of. It's helped a lot now that you insert the video when you're explaining what's going on, but I still have a hard time sometimes. I go by intuition a lot. Sticking the extra video in, I do that when I have time because I finally learned how. So these last few haven't had them because I haven't had the time to do it. So I see what you're saying. It takes years to be able to do that. But it just takes observing and getting information from the right person, because you'll be seeing things that people tell you that mean specific things that don't mean anything most of the time, and you'll see them. I don't remember where we discussed this the other day, Greg, where we found out if after watching like shows like Lie to Me and those things, people's ability to tell somebody's lying went down. Who was talking about that?
Hunley, and we were doing his show.
Oh, yeah, we were doing Eric Hunley's show. Hi, Eric. And which we're doing today, actually, right? We're 4:30 or 5:30?
Yep, we're on with Peter Hyatt later. Yep.
Yeah. So that'll be great. Great. So it's Eric.
Yeah, if you're a statement analysis fan, join Eric. If you're not, join Eric. Eric brings together some of the more interesting people on earth to me. I mean, and then us too. But yeah,
we're just fascinating.
Great stuff. Yeah, Eric. I always say that humans are about experiences. Eric has got some of the best knowledge brought some of the best knowledge people in general on. So yeah, it's been really interesting to go on his show. If you have never been there,
it's called Unstructured.
Yep. If you've never been there, go watch him.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, it takes a while to be able to do it with confidence. But as an armchair, person now doing it, great. And you can learn things that can help you at work and with the relationships and those types of things. But getting into where you're doing it for real, for a living, and talking about the information we've been talking about so far, that takes a while, because it's learning, and not just learning it, but experiencing what you're talking about, doing what you're talking about, and be able to do that. That's why we can sit on here and ask and go, okay, ask us anything you want to ask us, because we have the experience with that and read the books and know the knowledge, or have studied done the studies and read the studies, so that it can take a while. It can take a good little chunk of time there. Let's see. Let me refresh here.
Hey, Sabrina, I'll answer your question while we're here. What are some indicators someone has had resistance to interrogation training?
Hey, wait a minute. I just heard from Eric. It's 5:30 tomorrow, not today. It's tomorrow.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, right. Thanks. My head's somewhere else. Yeah. We're just excited to come there, Eric. So thanks for correcting us. We didn't make a mistake. Yeah, Sabrina, I won't share that with you, but yeah, you need to know resistance to be able to identify it. That's how it works, because there are a handful of things they're doing and you just recognize them.
Okay, you can say, I can't tell you to this question, Greg. Oh, wait, did you just read Sabrina's?
I just answered it.
Okay,
yeah.
sorry, man.
Thanks, Eric, for keeping us honest.
Yeah. I gotta.
Yeah, while we're on that topic, I'll tell you this, Sabrina. Even good interrogators, if they've not been exposed to how resistance works, it's hard for them to identify it because it's a specific thing and how it works. Okay. Gregory. What's up, Scott and Greg? When someone has told a lie consistently for years and years, like Jeffrey McDonald,
that's what I'm looking for.
How does that affect the body language as the years go on? Well, here's the thing. If you do the same thing over and over and over, and you've heard me say this before about cover stories, the reason cover stories don't work is because if I ask Scott, hey, Scott, what did you do yesterday? He's going to give me a story about going to pick up hot chicken because it's Tuesday, and that's what he does. And he's going to tell me about going to Hattie B's, and he's going to have some graphic things to say about what he saw along the way. He's going to have accessing cues as he's thinking in his head about what he saw. He's going to talk about coming back, sitting down, about waiting for the power to be out. And all that's going to be a story with lots of illustration. By the way, watch this week's story, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. He's not going to have to make up the details as he goes. But the same thing is true of a person who's told a story a million times. It gets to be rote, and they're going to access the same place because they're going to memory for something they've rolled over and over and over in their head. When you ask a question that requires them to think and they have to move outside that rote memory they've done, then you might get a different accessing cue. So it gets tougher and tougher to interview a person like Jeffrey McDonald, who's told a story a million times, because you can't think of a question he hasn't asked. I'm trying my best to get access to Jeffrey McDonald right now face to face. And I know he's got some serious health problems. I'd love to talk to him. And guys, the thing you have to do when you go in to talk to these people is suspend all that judgment, because, you know, we all have our opinions, but I've never met him face to face. If I met him face to face, I might have a different opinion. So yeah, I'd love to meet him. We're working on that. I just don't know if it'll happen yet or not.
Yeah. Okay. And there's some people on YouTube asking, why aren't they answering our questions? This is actually for our body language membership community at bodylanguagemembership.com. If you want to join, come on in. We're having a blast in here. And just bodylanguagemembership.com. So we're answering the questions from people inside the membership, but we're putting it on YouTube because, number one, I don't know how to get it off YouTube.
Yeah, one of you techie guys could probably help us if you want to turn it off. But we figured it was okay if other people watched what the body language membership people are asking, because, you know, they're reading things that we're putting up all the time and they're asking more complex questions sometimes. Yeah. But you guys know that we do respond to things as well out there on the behavior panel, and we'll eventually do a live Q&A on behavior panel as well and bring the other guys.
And I don't know how to say this name, Begitte. How do you say that, Greg?
I don't know. I'm guessing it's a Scandinavian name, I believe, and I'm not the best at pronouncing those sometimes.
I don't know if it's Begitte or something like that, but it looks like Begitte. No. Anyways, you said Eric looks like a sweet guy.
Eric's a nice
adorable
guy. We like Eric.
He's precious. So, yeah. Sorry, Eric. Yeah, I thought that was today for sure. I got to start looking at my calendar earlier.
I don't like looking at my calendar.
Let's see. What else we got here? Let me find a good one. If you find one, Greg, you jump in.
Okay. Alicia, we don't know about what's the biggest risk of being abducted. I would say if there's a van and there's something in that, you know, it just creates opportunity. Kind of like I always say, verbal bridging creates the opportunity to say something that's not true or to leave out time. It doesn't mean that a person driving a van is going to do something to you, but it probably gives an opportunity, and that's what you've read. Let's see. Go further down.
Do you think we ought to do O.J. Simpson?
A lot of people ask here, hey guys, if you're voting for O.J. Simpson, tell us now.
I mean, it's so done.
Yeah, guys, it's been, maybe we'll do it when we run out of stuff. We got lots of interesting folks right now that we're coming up with, but we may do the O.J. Simpson again. I think, at some point people have seen so much of it, but maybe we have a different take.
But yeah, let's see. This is from Charity. Greg, In your best-selling book, How to Spot a Liar, you share with readers the anatomy of a conspiracy theory. You start by saying conspiracy theories are always are easy answers to complex problems. Human beings naturally simplify through the use of fiction when something is very hard to understand. From your observations, what do conspiracy theorists or cultural aggregators have in common in the way of facial expressions, body language, etc.?
Well, the only thing I've ever noticed about folks who fall for conspiracy theories is that they're always passionate. And passion is, we use Marx. Now we'll tap into Mark Bowden. Passion plane is up here. Doesn't mean their hands are always that their elbows are always going up that high, but they're animated. They're animated when they believe in a conspiracy theory. And Charity, great question, because I find conspiracies to be just an easy answer. The world's a complex place. And I think I quote in that book one about Jesse Ventura talking about they were going to round people up, shoot them, bury them. And his proof was a bunch of casket liners or grave liners that were piled up in a rural area. Well, where would you have them pile them up? Downtown New York? It's just, and you take into account how many people die a day. You have to have those things sitting somewhere so that you can keep moving. So it's easy to find a conspiracy theory to tie a lot of facts together. When you start digging things up, things are usually really complicated. They're not as easy as a simple theory like that. So yeah, but the body language I usually see, and I know a couple of people who are big conspiracy theorists, is they're animated, they're excited because their brains are on fire for what's possible. Hopefully it helps.
Here's one from Hema. How does anyone in your life manage to throw you a surprise party? They don't.
Exactly.
They've been giving it a shot, but that's where your body language skills come in and you pretend like you're surprised because you know what it looks like. So yeah, that's another thing from our question earlier about body language and understanding it and having an in-depth knowledge of it. You're not going to get a surprise party.
Yeah,
nobody's going to be able.
You lose some cool things when you learn to pay attention to people, but like being surprised. Now, I'm not going to tell you you're never surprised because there are things that surprise you, and there are all kinds of things that can surprise you, but it's not usually a birthday party or something like that. It's something you haven't seen coming because of something. And we project too. We're humans, right?
Yeah. All righty. Let's see what else we got. How do you manage to deal with a pathological liar?
They're entertaining. That's how I deal with them. They're
very much so.
Because then you feed, what I love about pathological liars is you just feed them a little data and they'll just go on and on and on and on. Or you just don't pay attention to them, one or the other. That's how I deal with them.
Okay. Bridget, I think that's how you say it. I think I'm saying it right at this point. She says, no, I'm not voting for OJ, but I would love to see you guys do another nerd show on the behavior panel. Which one was the nerd show?
The one where we brought in Jim Smith.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was sort of selfish. It was just for us, but I think people liked it anyway. We should do more. I guess people find those kind of things interesting because I think a lot of people that are watching are a lot like us. I'm finding that's true, actually. When I start talking to these people, we do these Zoom meetups. They're just like us. Let's see.
Hannah, how do you defend yourself against someone trying to gaslight you? Ask details. People who are making up stuff often don't have all the details. They are so accustomed to getting away with things when you're talking about somebody who's just making up a story and going down the path. If you start trying to tie it back, and I would say there are 4 kinds of lies. There's lies of omission where you leave something out, and then after that, ways to hide time are good indicators. There are lies of commission, and I make up something from plain cloth. That's probably the gaslighting piece. When you make up something from plain cloth, all you got to do is ask ancillary questions, things about something beside the story, because all of our lives are photo albums and all those photos tie together. If it's a single photo out by itself, it can't stand. And then there are lies of transference and embellishment. Transference, I take your life and turn it into mine. That's a hard one to break because I might know all the details. And then embellishments, the fish was this big. And those are team lies. What I usually do is say, who else was there with you? And then they start to get uncomfortable and start to back up. Those are just a handful of tools I use.
Okay, here's one from Helen. And it's interesting how animals seem to be able to read body language of humans. Do you have any thoughts or insight on that? Yeah, that's true. They're really good at it. Dogs are great at it. Horses are great at it. Greg, I know you're way up into horses. Why don't you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, so guys, I have a bunch of horses. I have more than I should because I breed horses and sell babies. And right now I got a couple of babies that I haven't sold. And so great readers of body language for a reason. See those claws? Your eyes on the same side of your head? You look like a predator because you are, and they understand that, and they're really good at reading intent. There's studies, there's something out of Sussex University that shows that a horse can read a person they've never met based on rigidity to their joints and that kind of thing. And for obvious reasons. If you're prey, you want to identify a predator and understand how it works. If you're a dog, you look to humans as alphas, you want to understand how they think. And the other thing to remember is a dog can smell things that we can't begin to smell. And I've told people this many times, but in prisoner handling and capturing people, you can smell fear. So if you can smell it, imagine a dog. So animals are designed to read that. And I always say, so are we. We just turned it off.
Yeah. All right.
And we're running out of time pretty quickly here, Scott. So
we can go a little longer. I can go as long as you can, Greg.
I can go a little longer.
We can stay on a little bit longer. Let's see. Amanda, please do some Sylvia Browne or other alleged psychics mediums on the behavior panel. Let me tell you something. That's one of my favorites to talk about. We should do that, Greg. We've talked about it before. Before we started the behavior panel, Greg was always saying, you know what we ought to do? I was like, what? He said, we ought to do a video on, and what we'll do is a channel where all we do is talk to people who've seen Bigfoot and been picked up by aliens and seen UFOs. And what we do is talk to them about, and talk them into saying, it's sort of an interrogation thing, I guess, where you talk them into admitting they really didn't see Bigfoot or didn't fight with Bigfoot or where the story was, and let them, but you got to give them a way of saving face to get out of it.
I'd love to meet somebody who has seen something like that I could believe, honestly.
Me too.
It'd be cool.
But you know what? That guy we talked to the other day, Rich, on Eric's thing, man, I think that guy saw that. I really do.
Yeah, guys, here's the thing about paranormal anything. Number one, can't prove it, can't disprove it, right? Ghost. I can't prove there's no ghost any more than I can prove, radiation was the thing we didn't know about. So I don't know. But what I can do is tell whether a person's just making something up or they believe what they're saying. And that's the best you can do with anything paranormal or anything cryptic that we can't prove. So that's what we do. We say, I believe this because the person's telling me what they remember or what they think they remember, and that's the best you can hope for.
Yeah, we should do some psychics though.
Yeah, I love psychics. Yeah, they're good.
What's the guy?
Fish? Scott. Now, I'm not saying that somebody doesn't have some ability. I don't know. I've just never met him. Scott.
Yeah.
Scott, I think I remember seeing when you were young, you had a friend named
Billy.
Billy, yeah, Billy, and Billy had.
He had really short hair and
if you fish and you can read body language, you can get all kinds of stuff out of people.
Oh yeah. We should do that, Greg.
Yeah,
we should do that. Let's talk to guys and see. Let's see. Yeah, Sylvia Browne.
Yeah, Sylvia Browne. I think Sylvia Browne's no longer with us, but I think she was bold in hers. Two big things, right?
Well, funny enough, she came to me this morning and said, you know what? One time I was on Dr. Phil, and you know what let's see. Beth Murphy. I haven't read this whole thing yet. I'm often asked to help people with workplace investigations, theft, covering up for rule breaking, etc. There's such an us and them that I've noticed that even coworkers who know the person committed the offense will still not offer any help because it's more important for them to stay socially connected than to answer honestly. How do you break through that?
Yeah, so there are a few things.
That's tough.
When you're dealing with Maslow, which is what you're talking about, it gets very difficult. And the only way to make that change is to have a different bonding with them or to ensure that there's no repercussions. There's all kinds of terms for that. Most folks are not going to rat out somebody they work with. It's just the nature of people. And I think you're right, it's dead on. It's harder by far. I actually have a friend who does that for a school system. And it's hard to get people to tell you that kind of stuff. What you're going to have to do is get confidence from them, and it can't be an us and them thing. You have to get to the point where you have a new normal with them. By the way, that's the nature of interrogation. Everybody always has this vision of us being these harsh, bright light rubber hose guys. And in fact, what we do is get to a new version of their Maslow and make them trust us and feel bonded to us. It's really what works. I get all the time in comments, Greg, how do you feel about torturing people? And I always say torture doesn't work, never has worked, never will work. It can force a person to say something is all it can do. And then the hard work of interrogation has to still be done. So it's not a shortcut. And I'm not a fan of it as a result. So yeah, just to give you an example.
I remember one time I don't remember where we were. I don't know if you said this or I read something you said, but you said, I can get anybody to tell me anything. All I need is a pair of garden clippers, and you start cutting their fingers off at one at a time without telling you anything.
The problem with that is, guys, somebody's going to tell you what you want to hear when you.
Yeah.
It's been used in the Middle East by armies, and you can go find the studies and go find what they've done. And these guys cut people's fingers off, and of course they said something. Of course they said something. You start running out of fingers, but the problem with that is, number one, you turn into a monster. I actually had this discussion with Alan Dershowitz on Nightline one time many years ago, where he was advocating for warrants for torture. And my answer was, okay, you make these people who torture people for a living and it's okay. Where do they live when they come home? Because that changes a person. So I'm not a fan of torture, never been a fan of torture. And, I always, if you want my definition of torture, very simply, what I always taught is if you think you're hazing, you're torturing, because hazing, like in college and fraternities, is meant to make those kids quit. And if you can't quit because you're a prisoner, hazing is torture. It just is. And that's an easy definition to get your head around. And then it's a matter of whether it has value enough that you as a society are willing to do it. I prefer we don't. And that was my conversation with Dershowitz.
So, and somebody asked, and I'm looking at the YouTube thing. I wonder what the best book on Maslow's triangle is.
I'll have to go find one. I read them all years ago. I use Maslow's hierarchy in books that I've written, a book called Get People to Do What You Want, to explain how to manage people in those situations, how to make them get esteem or belong more. So, for example, the last question, if I push a person to the point they're pushed out of Maslow, how do I bring them back in? I have to have some kind of power to go and illustrate that they're like the other people. So, yeah, I'll find something we can put it in notes. Scott,
that's actually a great book, Greg.
Yeah, thanks. It's one of my favorites, actually. Yeah, all it is, guys, if you've read my Get People to Do What You Want, it took me 20 years to learn that stuff. And I always say maybe I'm a slow learner, but it's about why everything we're talking about, interrogation, elicitation, manipulation, why all those work. And it's simple. It's when you read the book, you'd probably go, yeah, that's nothing profound. But it took me a long time to figure it out. So maybe I'm just slow.
Okay, Mel asks, can you do more episodes on the behavior panel to show clips of the same emotion? I just watched one of the apologetic videos and it was very helpful. We could do that,
Yeah. Yep. Well, one of the things sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, one of the things we've considered, guys, is doing a special on 4 psychopaths and showing commonality and how they move and how they deal with people and how they interact. And so we'll do more of those. We're just right now trying to keep things open-ended enough. But yeah, I think having an emotion and looking at it from multiple people is a good idea. And we'll talk to the other guys about it. Yep.
Okay. Let's find another good one. Oh, man. Do you see one in there anywhere, Craig?
What's that?
So you see one anywhere?
Yeah, I'll look quickly.
There?
Hold on one second.
So what do you personally do to prepare for interviews or interrogations you know are going to take over 6 hours? That's from John. Well, when you go in, you got to know as much about that person as you possibly can. Depending on what the situation is, you may have a whole lot of information about them. And you may have sometimes nothing at all, except where they live, where they were picked up, or where they work, because it's something you're doing for that company, that bank, that hospital, or whatever. So that may be all the information you can get. But if you're going to be talking to somebody and you think it's going to be 6 hours, then you're going to have a heck of a lot of information, because that means they've done something horrible. So you're going to get a lot of the backstory on them, and you'll spend some time looking at that as well. That takes a little while. So you can remember these things, maybe take some notes, so you'll know how to set your questions up. You'll know how to bait them. You'll know how to you'll understand the approach better as you go through. You know where they come from a financial situation. Are they having problems with money? Did they just buy a big house and a car and something else and have a kid too? Maybe that's the root of what the problem is. There are all kinds of things you can do, but you'll get a lot of information. If you're pretty sure it's going to take a while, you'll get a lot of information.
Well, and in my years of interrogating, I would say that you spend more time preparing than you do interrogating, and even for a simple interrogation, because we observe the source, as we would refer to the person, before we bring them in. We observe their search. We observe all the things that go on. So we're building a picture of that person. Because remember, most of interrogation is the psychological ploys or the approach to getting the person to talk, and that's sharp interrogation. That is not the other kind. That's not police interrogation to get a confession. But even then, even when you're talking to somebody, a terror suspect, you're still trying to build a picture because you need a psychological lever to get into their head to get them to talk. And you got to have as good an understanding as you possibly can, and take some pretty good guesses along the way.
Here's one from Charity. She says, this is for Scott. Networking and the music industry, and a music industry event. Would you share a story about networking and body language at a music industry event, whether in Nashville or Los Angeles? Everybody at those things is full of it. Everybody's putting on a show. The music business makes the movie business look benevolent when you get behind the scenes. I mean, some of these people are just cutthroat. So everything's a show. Everything is just, hey, and you're the most fantastic thing I've ever seen. And that's why I never could get along with A&R people. I just couldn't do it. Just tried my best, but could not do it. And so a lot of them hated me, even though I would help their company a lot by selling a lot of records, millions, for real. A lot of them didn't like me because I couldn't put up with it. After a while, I just cannot do it anymore. And they would do something, and they had done it. That had said something about you or had taken your idea and done something with it and talking like, hey, man, what's going on? This is fantastic what you're doing. I actually had a guy one time take some tracks I had done to another studio and play them for this group of people who are fairly famous. And one of the guys in the band called up and said, hey, man, this cat's down here. This guy's doing our record, is playing your stuff and saying it's his. I said, what'd you tell him? He said, I didn't tell him anything. I was going to wait for you to get here. I said, don't say anything. I'm sure I'll run into it at some point. So I still haven't run into him.
Love your new record.
Yeah. So, but he was telling everybody it was his. And they're like, we'll do this. I did this. And he thought it was something that wasn't going to come out. And it came out and did really well. So he ended up looking like an idiot. But at the same time, I haven't run into the guy, but one day I will. Actually, I didn't run into him because what I did was this. I would tell this. Screw it, I'm not in that business anymore. So anyway, this guy had taken my tracks and played them for this group. He was doing really well, right? And he was like, check this out. This is something I've done. And so he was acting like it was all, and they were like, hey, this is, I don't know if they said it was all cool, but anyway, whatever the reaction was, they reacted to it. And my buddy calls me and goes, hey, man, this is your stuff this guy's playing over here, right? I played on this. I mean, I did the background vocal. I said, yeah, that's my stuff. He said, yeah, that's what I thought. I heard me out. I said, well, what'd you say? He said, I didn't say anything. I was going to talk to you and then see if you wanted to come down and talk to him. I said, no. I said, how long are you going to be working today? So we're going to be there for 2 weeks. I said, great. I'll see you tomorrow. So what I did was I ran out to Franklin, where they have lots of farms and stuff. And I got this box. It sounds horrible, but I'm going to tell anyway. I've never told this story. And so I got a bunch of cowpoo and I put it in this box and I wrapped it. But I got Easter grass and made it look really nice in there. And I before I put that stuff in, I put a ribbon in it and put that on top of it, and then tied the ribbon. And then I closed the box, and then I wrapped the box up like it was a present. And then I went down there with a note on it. Because I knew when I went down there, it would be one of those situations where, what are you doing here? Because I'd never met this guy before, but I met him that day. I know I just said I never saw him, but I'm not going to say his name. So I go in and I take the box, and he said, this is, and the receptionist, I knew her. And she said, hey, what are you doing here? I said, I got a gift for what's his face. She said, oh, okay, great. Well, go on in. I said, no. I said, just tell him he's got a gift. Don't tell him it's me. She said, okay. So she gets on the phone and says, hey, somebody's brought you something. I said, okay. The guy comes out and he goes, hey. I said, hey, man, I'm Scott Rouse. I don't think we've met before. He said, no, we haven't met before. And I said, the guy said, I got you something. I brought you something. I brought you a thing. He said, okay, well, let's open it up. I said, no, that's a studio gift, man. Go open in the studio. So, of course, he goes in the studio. And about 30 minutes later, I was getting lit up because everyone was like, oh, my God, dude, I can't believe you did that. I can't believe you did that.
That's funny.
It got a little bit worse than that, but that's the story. So
So a couple of things. Maria, that is a great story, Scott, by the way. Thanks for sharing music stuff with us, because we know we can't see all that. Greg,
I hope somebody that knows that guy tells him about this and he watches it. He's going to be...
That's funny. Vengeance is stinky. Yeah. So, Greg, what breed of horse do you breed and sell? Quarter horses. I've got old blood quarter horses, like, kind you work cows on, that kind of thing. And I've used them for a little bit of everything. Great breed of horse, quiet-minded, do what I ask. I also have a big Percheron thoroughbred cross that I ride. So, yeah, a bunch of different ones.
Okay.
So we probably should start to wrap up. Scott, we got another thing.
Oh, yeah. It's 15 till almost.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for watching this. If you're not a member of Body Language Membership, go ahead and at least go check it out. Go take a look and see what you think. And everybody in the membership, we're having the best time. And thanks for being here with us and for talking to us and asking questions and for talking back and forth in the community section down there.
Yeah, a couple of things, guys.
That's really fun.
We can't read everything in community. If there's something specific we need to weigh in on, tag us, because our intent with this thing was never to be the guy in there reading everything that everybody writes and commenting on everything, because we want you to comment and you get to know each other and share things you're learning and books. But guys, if you're on the YouTube channel and watching us, thank you for joining us. We really, it's an accident. Scott didn't figure out how to move us out of there, but we'll leave it that way if it makes sense for everybody and just leave it out there for a while. And those of you who are part of our Body Language Membership, thanks for everything you do. Thanks for all the comments you're making, and we'll get some more content up for you shortly.